Anyway, so it's good to be with you tonight, and I trust these next 6 weeks will be a little bit of enlightening of what transpires in the Old Testament world. As I said last time we were here, we talked about the book of Genesis, went through the creation accounts and some of the flood accounts, and maybe I should have picked up with the patriarchs, but what we know, which is very little, even now when we get into the book of Exodus, it's very little. But a lot of information is being discovered all the time. And as you know, I am an archaeologist. I have my own excavation. I'm there in Israel. You can join with us. Liberty University is one of our consortium members, Palm Beach Atlantic University. And so if you're looking for something to do this summer, the third week in May, we take off and there for 3 weeks, and you can join us. In fact, I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight before we get started, give you an update on what has transpired this last summer. And then, so you might think about that if you are sending one of your grandkids or whatever, if you have grandkids. I'm looking out in the room, looks like most of us here have grandkids. I have 10, how about you? And they were just all at the house, in fact, last week, 17 people in the house. Woo! Yeah, you got 10 great ones, wow. Mine still ain't the marrying age yet, but I'm getting there, but not for another 10 years or so. But anyway, so we want to open with a word of prayer. Father, which art in heaven, thy kingdom come. Maybe today. We look forward to that day. And in the meantime, we pray that you'll help us to remain faithful to you and the things that you entrusted us with, to be good stewards of our assets, so that we can look one day, maybe even this next few hours, we can hear those words, well done, thou good and faithful servant. So we just pray for each one here tonight, pray for the special needs as the violence just seems to run rampant. But it's a comforting thought that knowing that you are in control, as we can look down through history and see your mighty hand as it's chosen with Abraham and all the way down to our present day. And so we know that you're the sovereign God in control of all things. And so we again commit this, our bodies and our attitudes and emotions, all these things to you, and just trust that we can use them for your glory until your kingdom comes. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. All right, so I want to give you a little preview of what we did this past summer, just a little one. I'm not going to go to a full expose on it, but anyway, this is our site. We're digging at the site called Tel Gezer, not Geezer. It's called Gezer. All right, so Tel Gezer. And of course, we made the cover of this archaeological magazine called Biblical Archaeology Review a couple years ago. That's not me, obviously. I was there, so was Paul, my uncle. But they photoshopped this out and put this burly guy. He's actually my boss at New Orleans, is Dr. Dennis Cole. Usually on this archaeological magazine, every January, they publish all the digs that are transpiring throughout the ancient, throughout the Mediterranean world, and it will be true again this January. And they usually put pretty girls, and they've always got harassed. Why you always put the pretty girls on there, in short shorts and all that kind of stuff? So they said, well, we'll get them this time. I'll put Dr. Cole on the cover with a beard. Anyway, this is the inside of our tunnel, all right? We're digging the oldest water system now in the world. It dates to the time of Abraham. Unbelievable. There's nothing else like it. It's unique, one of a kind. And as I made mention, we're digging it New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, but it's also sponsored by the Israel Natural Parks Authority and the Israel Antiquities Authority. Dr. Svika Suk, who's the chief archaeologist for all the parks of Israel, is my co-director, and he's actually a water guy. I'm not a water guy, but anyway, Dr. Cole, and then myself, as I mentioned, and another fellow by the name of Dr. Jim Parker. Anyway, this is just to give you a little view again of what Gezer looks like. Gezer, it's oblong shape. It goes from west to east. This would be the west, and that's the east. It's about 35 acres, all right, 35 acres. And mentioned about 13 times in the Bible. Probably the most significant place it's mentioned in the Bible is in 1 Kings chapter 9, when Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter, the only king that we know of outside of one out of a Hittite king to ever marry a Pharaoh's daughter. And this city was still in the hands of the Canaanites. And he conquered it and gave it to King Solomon as a dowry. Amazing, amazing. And of course, not only did he conquer the city, but Solomon also fortified it, which is very interesting because there are two other cities mentioned along with it. In 1 Kings 9:15, it says Solomon fortified Gezer, Hatzor, and Megiddo. In fact, how many have been to Israel before? Oh, so you all went to Megiddo, right? Armageddon? And you walk through the gate complex. That's the only way you can go in. I dug there for 7 years, Israel Finkelstein. And you can walk through the gate complex. Same thing here. This little gate, the gate complex, which is right here. This is the Solomonic gate. There's also one at Hatzor. And so by inference, it seems to suggest, since they all date to about the 10th century, that these are the gates, part of the fortifications of Solomon's project. Anyway, this is our water tunnel, but it's not. It's located to the west of the gate complex, and it's over here towards the, as I said, towards the west, in front of another massive gate that's bigger than this one over here. It's the Canaanite period, the Canaanite gate, right here. In fact, we started opening a new excavation in this area this past summer. Very enlightening. Again, just to back up a moment, keep in mind the reason why we're doing archaeology is because this is the only new evidence anywhere that's contributing to the biblical studies. All right? It's contributing to biblical studies. There's nothing else. You can go over all the theological debates, but they've been hashed out for hundreds of years. But archaeology, you actually get your hands in the dirt and you actually get to touch and handle and see the actual material remains that you are reading about in the Bible. And so this is a very significant site, Tel Gezer. It's actually located on the crossroads between Mesopotamia and Egypt on the main highway that goes right through its front door called the Via Maris, the Way of the Sea. And if you know your Bible, it's mentioned only one time, and that's in the book of Isaiah, chapter 11. Gezer protects the Ajalon Valley. You all have been up, if you've been to Israel, you landed at Ben Gurion Airport. The valley that you go up to Jerusalem, that's the Ajalon Valley. All right, that's the Ajalon. All right, so you're on the Ajalon Valley, and that takes you right up to Jerusalem. And so Gezer sat at the front door there to protect anybody coming in or out, or also to defend the approach up to Jerusalem. Anyway, this is the massive complex, all of this area here. You can see the gate complex. Then over here to the west, a little bit further, is a huge block tower. It's as big as this room, if not bigger. It stands already 4 stories high. Unbelievable. Dug or built back at the same time of the patriarchs, right around 2000 BC. And so all of this complex goes together, I believe, the tower, the gate, and then our water system is right there. In fact, we're doing 2 projects, not only cleaning out the gate complex to see the connection between it and the water system, but we're also taking out all of this fill over here, a bunch of fill, because the entrance to the gate and the entrance to the water system, which is right here to the west, you come in from the north and go and turn to the east, is at the same level. In other words, as you walk through the gate, you could walk straight through and hit the water system. It's on the same level. And so you would not know that today because of all the debris by a previous excavator back in the 1900s, a guy by the name of Robert Stewart McAllister, who dug the whole site across all the way over to here, 29 trenches, and he backfilled all his trenches, and he created huge mounds that basically lost all the stratigraphic sequence. So we've been coming back through and opening this all up. We've been there for 6 years. Next summer will be our 7th season, and we hope to finish the project this summer, if not even this winter, because this winter we're going to go back and hopefully with a water cannon, shoot the rest of the dirt and suck it out with a pump, and hopefully be able to extend all the way back into the cavern. So this is what you see here. It goes down to into the east. It's 150 feet underground. 150 feet underground. It's 26 feet tall. This is about 9.5 feet. So triple this, 26 feet tall, 14 feet wide. And their steps are all visible now. We uncovered all the steps. And you can walk all the way down to the bottom, and it's still going down. So this picture is wrong because it goes all the way down to here now. We've uncovered more, and it's still going down. So it's just amazing piece of work. Anyway, this is the diagram of what the site, of what it looks like, based upon McAllister, who dug it back in 1905, 1907. These are the steps going down, and it stops at the bottom. He called it a water pool. You can see it here in blue. And then he realized that there's a cave extending to the east, even further beyond that. And so what he did, and which is important for us, is that he could not get across this water pool. It was too murky and it was deep. He didn't know how deep it was, so he put some stone slabs across it. He called it a causeway. Well, I'm glad he did, because he sealed all the contents within this water pool. And he proceeded to go back into the cavern, which is another 80 feet back in. And so we've been working on the project. We cleared it all out, all his debris. He actually, like I said, he uncovered most of it. But in after he uncovered it, he dug it in the wintertime. A huge storm came along, and all of the debris that he had stacked up around here fell back in and covered the system back up 60%. And that was in 1907, and no one has been down in it since now. So we opened it all back up again after 100 years. We actually got into the cavern a couple years ago, and we're able to walk into the back in. It actually opens up. It's still blocked about 1/3 to maybe even maybe a half. So we're going to come back in with a water cannon this summer, maybe this winter, and blast the rest of it out and see actually how deep it is. Because like I said, this slide is wrong. It actually goes down even deeper, another 20 feet below what is pictured there. So amazing system. Now keep in mind, we talk about the Canaanites in the Bible. They're mentioned, oh man, how many times in the Bible? A couple hundred times in the Bible, the Canaanites. And of course they're pagan. God says wipe them out, get them out of your backyard. They're going to corrupt you, they're going to influence you. And of course the Israelites did not do that, and they were corrupted, and they became just like them. And so they're very pagan, and they did not convert to Yahweh. But at the same time, they're probably some of the most fantastic engineers in the world, in the ancient world. You saw the pyramids. Some of you have been to Egypt, right? 416 feet tall is Cheops pyramid. 416 feet tall. Base of over 8 acres. Massive stone blocks. That was built 600 years before this was even opened. 600 years. And of course, this is one of the elements that we're looking at. What about the engineering of the Canaanites? What were they like? What kind of people were they? Well, just to carve this out of the rock and go down 150 feet. Keep in mind, there was no dynamite. No dynamite. They had no steel tools. Most of them were brass, flint tools, stone hammers, and they carved all this thing out. Unbelievable. So back up. This is where it's located. You can. It's not projecting very well. I don't know if I can correct the color on that or not. Anyway, this is that massive tower. You see it right here? It's as big as this room, bigger than this room actually. There's the entrance, what it looked like when you first started digging. It still looks like that today. There's the tower. There's our water system. There's the gate right there. Now we've cleared all of this out, and we're working in the storage rooms next to the gate so we can do real archaeology. This is just mudslinging here, basically. But you can see we have cranes and bulldozers, all kinds of things to get us into the system. Well, this is what it looked like back in 1970. A good friend of mine, Joe Sager at Mississippi State University, and his team excavated there with Bill Deeber for 15 years. And they uncovered the wall of fortifications. This is the area I told you we're digging in now. All of this is basically covered back up a little bit. And then there's our water system right here. There's the gate. You can see the floor of the gate right there. You can walk on it. The floor of this gate is at the same level as the floor of our water system. So we're going to open all this up so that tourists can walk all the way through and walk down to the water system. In fact, we saw the parks have designed a nice ramp with lights and all kinds of things. And at the bottom of it, when you go down the bottom, a big pool, they're going to put a disco ball down. And so, yeah. Anyway, we talked with the girl about doing that. At least when tourists step down there, the ball comes down and music plays. Butterflies fly. Anyway. Again, this is what it looks like. All right, keyhole-shaped entrance. Number one, a step structure. And then a cavern at the bottom. It goes back 80 feet in. So quite impressive. So engineering is another key element. This is what it looked like when McAllister dug it. This is McAllister's excavation. You see all the debris around the mouth of it? The gate is over here. All of this fell back in. So it looked like it.
Was he the one that discovered it in 1905?
Yes. He's the one that discovered it.
What's the source of the water?
Rain. There is no, we thought it tapped into an aquifer down below. There's no aquifer. The aquifer is another 100 feet below. So that's really kind of changed our whole perspective on this thing, because why would you dig something this monumental just for a little pool of water at the bottom? Because it's not a very big pool. It's only 20 feet long and maybe 13 feet wide. All that, you could just dug a little well. You could have made a cistern, because we've had two geologists test the water, and all of it's rainwater. So there's we don't know what's in that cavern. I told you back, but it's still going down. We got a lot of speculations. Some people think it's a tomb. Some people think it's a cultic ascent down to the netherworlds. If you remember in the ancient world, they believe the departed souls went to the netherworld, which was in the ground. And you have references to people going to sacred caves to talk to their relatives, like in the Iliad, and, not the Iliad, but the Odyssey, and also Aeneas in the classic Roman work. So that's what we're going to find out. What exactly is this thing? I don't know. Anyway, that's what it looked like when we started. And that's what it looks like today. All right, because we uncovered all the steps, we had to build a ramp last summer. We left it there, and so that we can slide up all the dirt without bouncing on the steps and destroying the ancient steps. So that took us a week, put us really a little bit behind. But man, that's a great picture, isn't it? It's got this new lens last summer. Oh man, 2.8 Nikon, Canon, very nice. Anyway, advertisement Canon. They're not paying me for it. Anyway, there's a job for everybody, okay? There's a job for everybody. You say, well, I can't dig. You don't have to dig. We need people to sift. We do all wet sifting because all of it is mud, thick mud. We have 3 bays, 6 bays, 3 on this side, 3 on the other side, 3 power washers, huge hose. All this is sifted, it's sorted, it's cataloged. So we have a job for everybody. Even a person to run the crane. How's your finger? Can you do this? Do this? You're hired. Because you got to tell the crane to go up, go down. Someone has to watch it and stop. And then we actually have another winch inside it so that we have a winch operator, press a button. So a job for everybody. Anyway, so that's what it looked like, and that's what it looks like today. There's all the steps. Those are, you can see they're very badly worn. So
Is that sandstone or granite?
it's, no, it's not. It's limestone. Limestone. All of Israel's basically all limestone. Different types. This is a softer type of limestone called Eocene or marl, a soft chalky. So it wasn't, I mean, some places it was difficult to dig, but most of the time it wasn't that hard to dig because the rock is soft. But anyway, that's what it looked like. And so 6 years we got all the way down. Now we found out this guy has a water cannon that can shoot it and suck it out. We say, why didn't we hire him in the first place? We would have been done 3 years ago. But anyway, but at the same time, there are massive boulders down there as well. But anyway, you can see the height of it, quite impressive. So with that in mind, let me just show you, I don't know if you can hear it. But anyway, we did a scan of it. And yeah, no one come. Anyway, we brought a technical scanner in, and we actually and we digitized the whole tunnel. $7,000 project. It looks better on my screen, but takes you all the way down. This was not last summer, but 2 summers ago. But anyway, you can see all the niches and all the elements.
How do you get your air supply?
It's big enough. Don't need it. We have fans, but that ramp is all coming out when we put the new one in. But anyway, from that we can study it scientifically, cross sections, and measure everything, see everything.
Are you finding any artifacts when you're washing?
Nah, not really. Few things every now and then, but nothing. Mainly, no question it was used for water of some type, because down at the bottom is a bunch, I'll show you in a moment. Most of the materials that we found are storage jars. So anyway, you get a cross section of what it looks like now. And this is where we started. And like I said, now we're down about here, another 15 feet below this level. So massive. Anyway, along the way, there's some significant little, we hired a conservator to clean the ornamental arch. There's arch like this, there's sacred niches all along the way. That's why it's cultic, or they put niches to honor their god so that as they were digging this thing, they wouldn't get killed. But anyway, it's too ornamental just to be a water system. We think, some people think there's an exit outside the city. We haven't found that yet. They go down far enough so that they could exit out the base of the site. But anyway, very, very, very nice. And then a second arch at the bottom. But even here, you can get a close-up. I don't know if you can see it better on my computer, but you can see all the chisel marks where they chiseled the stone out. Unbelievable. But quite impressive.
What you're removing is mostly just silt.
Yeah, backfill. Well, now we're into, yeah, most of it's silt and mud.
You probably said, when was this finished to be used during that time? What year was that?
Well, the pottery we found right now dates to the 15th century BC. So that gives us what we call a terminus antiquem, our terminus postquem, the latest possible date that it was dug. But if the pottery is already there, then it was dug before the pottery came in. So this pushes it back somewhere just probably another 400 years based upon the wear and tear on the steps, which McAllister thought the same thing. So that puts it back about 2000 BC, which fits well with the gate and everything else we find. So there's another view of it. There, all along the way. See all the little handholds? You can fit, there's one on both sides. You can put your hand right, hold yourself up as you walk down, evenly spaced all the way down. Here's one of the little niches. Some of them have symbols in them, but we're not sure what they represent. It's hard to determine. But handholds all the way down. But actually, you can see the green line. That's how full it was. We dug down below it. Anyway, this is where we left off. This is the bottom of the pool. That was 2 years ago. This is the stone causeway that McAllister put across it. You can see we dug trenches. And then she's standing on it, and then we went down further and even further, so that even further than that. So we got all this debris to clean out next summer, or if we can do it this winter, to get down to the bottom. Anyway, there's other interesting markings along the way, little flutings. But this is the pottery, dates perfectly to what we call the late Bronze Age, 1500 down to 1200 BC. This is typical of the 14th century. But this is our most significant find. Just average everyday storage ware, but the canonical shaped base of it is typical of what the transition between what we call the 16th century and the 15th century, the Middle Bronze Age and Late Bronze Age. It's very early, dating at least to 1500 BC. So that means this is what was in the bottom that we're pulling out, tons of it. So that means it was dug somewhere before that time period. And so you put them together, they're huge amphoras. These are Canaanite amphora storage jars that you're looking at. So anyway.
Was there some event that created all the silt that filled up this thing?
That's, I kept asking my geologist, how did all this fill get back in there? Why was it abandoned? I don't even know why it was abandoned. Why would they abandon such a system like this? I don't know. Maybe they covered it up to hide it from, I don't know. But the silt just washed back in there. It filled it all the way back to the cavern. It would have taken 100 years, I think, to fill it back up. Some people say, no, 15 years. Anybody here a geologist? I keep asking my geological buddies. Haven't got a good answer yet, but yeah. What's that?
How about all the sandstones they got?
Yeah, they don't get that much here, though. Not at Gezer. Not enough to fill this thing up. Not enough. Anyway, so I was going to show you one more thing. You can take all of this, and you can make, this is what also my other life is about. I do archaeological reconstructions. So here you can see, there's the gate, there's our water system. Take you down inside for a ride. Still looks better on my computer. The color on this TV is not well. But anyway, you can walk all the way down inside, the oil lamps, the steps. This will need to be changed because this was done last year, and we've now modified it somewhat. But so been something like that. This is all part of a couple of programs. But there's quarries for flint, quarries where they mined it for flint. Then, like I said, niches like this one, and you'll get a picture of it. We still can't make out it looks like a door, which might be, which we know elsewhere. We have another niche like this one, this coming up, and there's the picture. It looks like a standing stone, which is mentioned in the Bible. There are 10 of them on top of Gezer. But anyway, we made your way down the steps. That's based upon that scan that we did 2 years ago. So there's that other mantle arch I was telling you about. And then it takes you all the way down to the pool.
And is the steps going down how steep are they?
39 degree angle. So not too bad, but regular steps. But you got to consider they calculated that this vaulted ceiling would hold the pressure so that the weight above wouldn't collapse it. There's no collapse anywhere in it, except for down in the tunnel. There's some collapsed soft chalk, but they calculated the height, the arch. The Romans, of course, invented the arch for architecture, but this is quite an amazing engineering feat. Anyway, so now you're all experts on water systems, so I expect to see I got all your names. If I don't see you there next summer, I'm coming after you. Anyway, so that's a little bit what we've been doing. That's give you an update. And hopefully if we go back this winter, we're looking to go back in January. If this fella, he was going to do it for us, but he had his equipment stolen, so he's looking at acquiring new equipment. And but I understand, anybody here dredge? I talked to a dredging company over in Clearwater. They said, yeah, we can dredge. We can separate particles as small as a golf ball, and plants and animals, we can separate those out as we dredge. Interesting, using the same principle. Well, that's the Canaanites. We're going to get to the Canaanites when we get into the book of Joshua a little bit more, all right? But that'll probably be next year. So this year we want to do the book of Exodus. And of course we're talking about, the Exodus itself, and we'll take you to Sinai and a couple other places. So with that in mind, let's take a look. I want to introduce to you what the principles are here in our in this class, and what we're basing everything on. All right. So we'll go to our PowerPoint presentation. We'll go to Old Testament. We want to look at the book of Exodus and the world of Moses. All right. That's going to be our topic this week, this 6 weeks. So you know everything you need to know about the book of Exodus. Like I said, I'm into context. You understand? That's the sacred word in interpreting the Bible, right? Context. From Genesis to Malachi, you have how many years? Well, take off Genesis. From Abraham, because we don't know how long it is between Genesis and Abraham, or Adam and Eve and Abraham. From Abraham to Malachi, what's the time frame?
1,500 years.
Yeah, 1,500 years. How many different people came through the land of Israel in that 1,500 years? Name me some. We talked about one already. Who was in the land when the Israelites came there? The Canaanites, right? They were there, right? They controlled the land. We know, and I'll show you a couple minutes. By these texts are actually right here, found in Egypt. They're called the Amarna text. You heard about them? They talk about even people harassing the Canaanites, and they're called the Habiru. Habiru sounds a lot like Hebrew, but it's not. But they're just wandering nomads that are harassing their cities. It could be the Israelites, I don't know. No one knows for sure. But these texts talk about it. from Egypt. If you remember Akhenaten, the sun god, and his wife Nefertiti, down there in Amarna, way south of Cairo. So context is everything. It's like, real estate. The key word for real estate is? Yeah.
Location.
The key word for Old Testament, for studies of the Bible, Old and New Testament, is context. So we got the Canaanites. Anybody else,
Persians.
The Persians. Where would they fit into the scheme of things? Malachi, closer to Malachi, or closer to Moses? Malachi. All right. Who comes before the Persians then? That's right. The Assyrians. Who comes before the before the Assyrians? Yeah. Before the Assyrians comes somebody else. We got the Persians. The Babylonians. We're working our way back, you see. Persians, Babylonians, then the Assyrians, and then Egypt, and then Canaanites. Oh, I mean, the culture's totally changed, like it's happening here in the United States, is it not? With immigrations and so on, the culture's changed. Well, is Malachi writing the same thing that Moses wrote? In fact, is Moses even writing Hebrew? Can't be, because Hebrew wasn't even invented yet. He's writing probably Aramaic or hieroglyphics. We don't know exactly. But the cultures change. And so you have to know the Persians, you have to know the Babylonians, you have to know the Assyrians, you have to know the Canaanites, you have to know the Egyptians to get into the heart of the Word of God, because they are totally influenced by their surroundings. Certainly there are elements within the Israelite religion that are different, that stand out. But there are a lot of similarities, and it's of course the dissimilarity, the differences that make Israel unique. But they wrote just like everybody else wrote. They didn't come up with a whole new type of writing system. If you're going to write a novel today, you basically follow the same pattern. You've got the beginning of the story, how it all started. Let me tell you, and you got you got introduction, you got the body and conclusion. Well, they would have wrote the same way back then in the ancient times as well. And so we need to understand the literary developments and all these things as we'll get into it here in a moment. So we're going to be dealing with the book of Exodus as we get in. And of course, our main man named Moses. You all know Moses, is that a Hebrew word? I'm testing your knowledge tonight, huh? You use Moses all the time? Yeah, it's not Hebrew at all. Are there any pharaohs with the name Moses in them? Yeah, there is. Thutmoses, Ahmoses. Moses is the tail end, means to be drawn out. One of many Moseses that we know of. Wow. So he's Egyptian, pretty much, trained up in the Egyptian court and so on. But anyway, we're going to get into, of course, the famous verse there in Exodus 3:14. I am who I am. The great name, what? What's the Hebrew name for God? Yahweh, of which we have the earliest inscription found in Jerusalem by my good archaeological buddy Gabi Barkai. But we'll get to that later. So we're dealing with Moses. He comes on the scene. We're going to talk about this next week a little bit about the dating of Moses and the Exodus. It's very controversial. Very controversial. No one knows exactly. I mean, we have some good hypotheses, but of course, how many times is Moses mentioned in Egyptian literature?
0.
In fact, who's the Pharaoh of the Exodus? He's mentioned in the Old Testament, correct?
Ramses.
No. Just as they helped build the storied cities of Pi-Ramesses, but the Pharaoh's not even mentioned. Wow. In fact, you don't even have a Pharaoh mentioned until even Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter. The Pharaoh's still not mentioned. The first Pharaoh ever mentioned in the Bible is who? Necho? No, that's Asa, a little bit later. But I heard it. Yeah, Shishonk. Solomon dies, remember? Pharaoh of Egypt comes up and takes everything out of the temple and leaves Rehoboam with nothing. He has to make shields of bronze. First Pharaoh mentioned. Not till way into the 10th century. 500 years after Moses. Wow, interesting. But that's also a key, another key we'll get to in a moment. Anyway, we're dealing with what's called the Late Bronze Age, right? So you have a lot of interesting periods. And if you want to be a scholar about it, it's very easy. We have the Bronze Age. Bronze Age, we have early, middle, and late. Pretty easy, huh? From 3200 BC down to 1200 BC. Why 1200? Because that's when we think the Israelites mount up, at least start to form a monarchy. Of course, under Saul and so on. 1200 BC. Plus, this is also a major invasion comes along. We talked about them many times. Anybody know who they were? That wreaked havoc on the Middle East. People called the Philistines. And you have the story in what book? What classic Greek book do we have the story of the invasion of the people coming across the sea?
Iliad?
Iliad. That's right. The Iliad recounts the destruction of Troy. And all fits well with the Philistines. But so we're dealing with, that's when it all happens, right around 1200 BC. So that ends the late Bronze Age. You say, what comes next? Good question. I'm glad you asked. It's called the Iron Age. All right, Iron Age. And that goes down to the destruction of the by the Persians, destruction of the Babylonians in 586 BC. Anyway, so this is Akhenaten right there, King Aton and his wife Nefertiti. There he is again. All those tablets I showed you earlier, all date from the 14th century BC, writing back and forth to the Canaanite cities. So a lot is happening during this time period. All right, this is the height of the Canaanites. That's why they were able to build the water system, the huge towers. They controlled the land. They were unharassed from 2000 BC, probably all the way down to right around 1500 BC, a little bit later, when the Egyptians finally mounted a campaign. After this guy died, his name was Thutmose III, came back up and conquered the land. Amazing. But anyway, this guy is significant in the history of Moses. Why? Anybody know why he would be interesting to study in relationship to Moses? Because he elevates one God above all the rest. What does that look like to you?
Sun God.
The sun god. Aton is another name for sun worship. Sun god. So he elevates sun god. A lot of people think the Israelites got their monotheism, the belief in one God, from this guy. But we'll talk about that as well. So we want to look at tonight, in the 20 minutes we have remaining, how are you going to study the Bible? There are layers. There are layers to studying the Bible. There is structure in the text. Did you know that? There is structure in the text. Like I said, it wasn't written in a vacuum. There were already literary motifs for understanding the Bible. And so as we look at the Bible, and we put them all up here, we're going to look at four. As we study the book of Exodus, we'll look very carefully. These are the 4 S's. I call them the 4 S's of understanding the Bible. Dan's 4 S's. I like it. 4 S's. There's always a story. There's always structure. There's always sources. There's always social and historical processes. This is what you need to know to understand the Bible. So it's a lifelong process. I've been doing it for, I don't know, wow, long time. 40 years, and I feel like I'm just now beginning, I think I can write a book. Working on a second one. But there's a lot involved in it. So let's take a look, all right? What do we mean by story, all right? Well, story is the overall concept of any book. The overall concept of the book. Put them all up here. First of all, you look very back in the book of Genesis. What are we dealing with here? That's the Exodus. We're dealing with covenant. Are we not? Did not God make a covenant with Abraham? Anybody know what kind of covenant was called? Yeah, but there's a covenant motif back in those days. We have many covenants. This was a special kind of covenant. Anybody know what was unique about that covenant with Abraham? Unconditional. Who said it? Richard, right there. My man. Unconditional. There's conditional covenants and there's unconditional covenants. Covenant that is unconditional. I'm going to do this for you no matter what happens. Conditional covenant is the if clause. I will do this if you do this. And of course, he made a covenant with Abraham. Says, I'm going to do what to you? I'm going to multiply you as the sands of the sea. Your name will be great. And through you, all the nations of the world will be blessed. Unconditionally, it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do to prevent it. I don't care what you do. Amazing. Amazing. So God's promise, all right? The covenant, of course, started with Abraham, the people. The Bible centers around who? The Jewish people. Everything is for the Jewish people. Always has been. All the way even down to the New Testament. Our Sunday school class now is getting the book of Revelation. And I believe the book of Revelation is for the Jews. It's a time of Jacob's wrath, but that's a different topic as well. Anyway, look at the Gospels. The Gospels has a story, does it not? The Gospels means what? Good news. So, the good news is that God desires a relationship with us. This is unheard of in the ancient world. I'm sorry, all the gods of Egypt, which are 1,000 of them, I mean, a host of them, same thing with Mesopotamia, Shamash, sun god in Mesopotamian religion, Aton, Ra, in Egypt, the main gods. There was no relationship with their gods. You understand? That's a big difference between the biblical world and the ancient world. Their gods never spoke to them at all. And here comes God on the scene and he gives revelation. The divine disclosure of sacred knowledge which you otherwise would not know. Deuteronomy 29:29. I reveal them to you. I reveal them to you. All the other ancient worlds, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Greeks, they had to go to priestesses and produce, get the priestess in a trance so that she could communicate with the gods, and they would hallucinate and all kinds of things to try to get some sign or omen or some kind of information from the gods, and even then it wasn't very direct. That's not true with the Israelites. They had direct communication with their God. The prophets spoke boldly. Big difference. I mean, that's probably one of the major differences in the Israelite religion compared to everything else around them. There was no relationship with their God. No relationship with their God. Had an idol, but the idol couldn't talk. Remember, Jeremiah makes fun of him. How can you make the idol with your own hands and then you put it up on the shelf and you worship it? I mean, that's kind of the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard of. You made it with your own hands and you worship the God? This is your God, something you made? Ridiculous. Anyway, of course, we know that the covenant, of course, with Moses, and he got the 10 Commandments, right? And so we'll talk about that on Mount Sinai as well. Well, what else is there? There's structure. What is structure? Back up. What is structure? Well, how are all the texts put together? In the Old Testament, how many different genres do you have? Well, I got a few of them listed for you, right? Is poetical books, is the Psalms the same as the Book of Kings?
No.
No. You all have your Bible. You can see very carefully that they even do what? They show you that the Hebrew poetry is different. They write it, they space it differently. It's poetry. It's poetry. Where Kings is historical narrative, and it's set off in prose. So you have to know poetry. There's some poetry mixed in sometimes with the prophets, but a lot of times they also write narrative. There's a format to this. Did you know that? And the Israelites copied the format of the day. It was nothing unusual. They wrote historical narratives, although there's some big differences because their God had a relationship with them. They wrote poetry, so did everybody else write poetry. Everybody else wrote historical narratives. So guess what? You got to know the text or have a good Bible dictionary that tells you about the text that relate to the book that you're studying. So we have creation accounts, which we talked about last year. Gilgamesh epic. We have the Sumerian creation list. We have the King's list from Sumeria that talk about creation accounts that line up somewhat with the biblical text, but vastly different. Poetical books. Did you know we have conquest accounts? When Joshua wrote the book of Joshua, which I believe he did, I mean, did he just say, all right, give me the words, Lord, what do you want me to say? All right, was it all pure dictation? God say, write this word, this word. It wasn't dictation. Joshua, now keep in mind, he was a brilliant strategist, wasn't he? Who was his mentor? Moses was trained in what? I mean, the Bible's telling you all these hints. They give you hints like Moses was trained in all the wisdom of Egypt. He knew how to write, he knew how to read, he knew all the different formulas, he knew all these things. And Joshua was right there next to him. How much did Moses communicate with Joshua? I wish we knew. That's one of my questions I'm going to ask Joshua when I get to heaven. How about you? You got a question? I hope my question books come with me when I got a little black book, you know. I want to usually carry it with me. I forgot it tonight, but if we go up, I want to grab that book real quick. And here's all my questions. At least I hope God has a videotaped library in heaven, don't you? Yeah, I want to see all of those things. I want to see the Exodus. I want to see the flood. What was it like? What was the Garden of Eden like? Anyway, so when Joshua wrote the book of Joshua, there was already a motif of how to write conquest accounts. This is very important, class. Why? Because you can take Joshua, and guess what? You can compare it with Egyptian literature, and everybody says, well, Joshua is a fictitious character. Most of my friends. And the scholar, Joshua, the conquest doesn't exist. It's an embellished story somewhere created during the Intertestament period. Well, guess what? No. The literary context of conquest accounts matches perfectly with the time period that we say Joshua lived. And we have many of the conquest accounts. We have a whole doctoral dissertation by Lawlord, if you're interested in reading the conquest accounts. But anyway, letters to churches, epistles, everybody was writing those things. Who was the most prolific writer in Roman world? Paul. And of course, as far as the Romans themselves, have you read some of Cicero's epistles? 900 epistles he wrote. Interesting. So there's structure to it. There's also, of course, sources. You look, this is the famous obelisk in Babylon. And it shows a fellow by the name of Jehu bowing down. But down below here it says, it talks about, I want to say Sennacherib, but it's not Sennacherib. It talks about Tiglath-Pileser coming in to Palestine, and he says, I took Jehu's cities, I made him bow down, pay tribute to me. He's pictured right there, bowing down to Tiglath-Pileser. And down here is this historical account. He's telling you all about this, what transpired. Historical accounts. We have historical narratives, the Kings, Chronicles, historical narratives. Well, we have patterns. We have government documents. We have family records. All of these things that are necessary to understand the Old Testament. So it's a lifelong process. And not only that, but you got eyewitness accounts, right? Even the book of Joshua says in Rahab, even to this day, as if she was alive, well, she was alive, telling the writer, here's what I saw, here's what I witnessed. And regional traditions as well. Just all of these things. Well, then, of course, we have other sources, our social and historical process. We have archaeology. Right? So, here's some of the elements you have to, back up. Here's some of the elements you have to look at. Bible backgrounds. That's why you're all here tonight. Geography. Everything functions in the ancient world on geography. Why is Gezer located where it is? Because it functioned to protect the Ajalon Valley. Cities weren't located in the ancient world just because they're a nice place to live. Gezer, Ashkelon, Ashdod, the 5 Philistine cities, Gath. Oh, Gath is an amazing site being excavated by Aaron Meyer. Uncovered the gate complex. Asked us to come dig it if we want to next year, but I don't think we'll be able to. But unbelievable sites. And all these were located because everything functions on geology. You're located to protect. Of course, you had to have other elements as well. You had to make sure you have water, right? Food. Archaeology, of course, that's a systematic analysis of distinct cultures. And so the only way you can get to it is dig. Yeah, I got to get your hands dirty. You all did it when you were a little kid, right? Played in the backyard. Yeah, I just love digging in the dirt. How about you? Maybe not, but we can now. It's getting down to a fine science because we have anthropologists, we have geologists, we have endocrinologists, we have pollen experts. We can tell you just by we can tell you everything that happened in this room by just taking the soil, sending it to an anthropologist, who can dissect the soil, tell you what you ate, tell you if there's any disease, tell you the food habits, how long it was there, how long they lived there. So many things you can learn. Amazing. Within temples and houses. Yeah, and all of this can, In the ancient world, Abraham invited them to their house. What was it? Same thing with down in Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot, come into my house. Well, we know all of these things. Amazing. There's migration theories. Did you know that? The Israelites did what? They migrated down to Egypt. And then they left Egypt. It's called migration. Luckily, the Canaanites did not have a wall. They didn't have a wall like we want to build with Mexico, right? Migrations happen all the time. Well, you can study that to understand how the Israelites came into the land. Amazing. Urbanization, all of these things, development states. Solomon, of course, really unified the city, the area in his urbanization. All these things to contribute to understand more and more about the biblical text. So as we look at the story of the book of Exodus, what is it, class? Well, here you go. Back up. Exodus, of course, is from slavery to the promised land. That's the story, right? From slavery to the promised land. And of course, the Exodus is mentioned almost by every biblical writer in the Old Testament. And there's Jewish scholars today that are high-ranking university status that deny the Exodus, and that they probably weren't Jews at all. The Jews were probably just Canaanites that rose up against their oppressors and took over, and they became the Israelites. They're actually destroying the very fabric of the Genesis account, the promise, the covenant made to Abraham. Because if they're not Jews, if there was no Abrahamic covenant, then what right do you have in the land? Remember, Manoch and Bacon got up and said, we're here because God has given us this land. It's amazing. Their own professors destroying their own historicity. Well, God's covenant promises now starting to be fulfilled. Come out of the land of Egypt and go into the promised land. A land flowing with? Yeah, I mean, it just dripped everywhere, right? So you have God's deliverance. At the same time, he reveals something about himself. He's holy, he's got laws, and he demands obedience. The Mesopotamian people, the Egyptians, what obedience? The God, what are you going to do? They made up. They didn't know what to do. Amazing. I mean, I wish we could go into more, but what's the structure of Exodus? Well, it's, of course, the Pentateuch, right? It's part of a 5-volume set. You got to have Genesis through Deuteronomy. Genesis, of course, the book of the beginnings. Exodus is the redemption. Leviticus is God's law. Numbers, of course, deals with the wilderness wandering, does it not? 40 years, 39 years actually. And then Deuteronomy means second law. Moses' farewell speech. He repeats it all again. So that's the structure. Look at the Pentateuch. What's the sources? Oh man, did you look at all these sources, class? You got to know them all. Have you started reading? Is there autobiographies? Yes. Moses is not the first one to write an autobiography. We got several Egyptian autobiographies. Wen-Amen in his autobiography, and a couple others. They write autobiography. Nothing new. We have itineraries. Did you know the Egyptians had a day book? That's what it's called, Egyptian day book. They had itineraries of where they're going to go next, what cities they're going to conquer, how they're going to conquer. They had day books, a day planner. What you find in Numbers 33 is the exact same thing that you find in Egypt. And guess what? Not to the 10th century, but to the 14th and 13th century. Same time period we say Moses lived. Not 900 BC, not 500 BC, but right. I can't do these kind of things. There are gifted scholars. I mean, I know a little bit of the languages, but a great book called The Reliability of the Old Testament. You really want to get into it? Serious? His name is Kitchen, Kenneth Kitchen. It's put out by Erdman's. It's called The Reliability. All of this that I'm telling you now, most of it comes from him. The Reliability of the OT, Erdman's. Fascinating read. It'll blow your mind. Mastering stuff. He goes through all this stuff. He knows all the languages. He knows them all. 15 different languages. Egyptian, hieroglyphics, Akkadian, Ugaritic, Coptic. In fact, in one of his letters he wrote, or one of the articles he wrote says, I couldn't sleep one night, so I got out my Coptic Bible. How many of you do that? Get out your Coptic Bible at night and read. Or you get out your hieroglyphic text and start reading. He's a brilliant man. One of a kind. Him and another guy named Alan Millard. Gifted scholars. He's now retired, but in fact they sent a team of scholars over there to pick the rest of his brain to come out with the last volume. brilliant, fine evangelical scholar, you know. And you can't argue with this guy because he knows the text. He's, you're wrong, Kitchen. Where? Show me. And he'll quote the text for you. He knows. He says, look at this Mesopotamian text. Compare this with the Egyptian text. Look, same thing. You compare this with the Hebrew text. They all line up. Brilliant. One of a kind. In fact, I wrote him a letter and for a book review, and I thanked him for a great book review. He wrote me back a nice letter. I framed it in my office. But I saw him a year later. I said, hey, I'm Dan Warner. He said, Dan, thanks for that letter. He remembered. I mean, that's kind of, I mean, few people get that kind of brain, right? Oh, man, how I wish. So I just held onto his hand. I was hoping something would rub off, you know. Let go of my hand, man, no. You know what I'm saying? Good stuff. We have administrative texts, organizations. You have census lists. Was Moses the first one to come up with census? Egyptians did census all the time. You have religious texts, obviously. Festivals, feasts, all these things. Moral code laws. You have look at all this. This is all involved in the book of Exodus. Civil laws, ceremonial laws, civil laws, social laws, covenants between God and Israel. All of these things exist. Israel, like I said, was not right in a vacuum. And not only that, you got dedications, right? The tabernacle. We're going to get to the tabernacle. This is a fascinating piece of work based upon Kitchen's analysis of the tabernacle. You think the tabernacle was you say, wow, a nice creation, but did you know it has Egyptian parallels? It matches perfectly with the Egyptians, Pharaoh's major hideaway. When he went into battle, he brought his own special tent, and everything matches perfectly with the tabernacle. I mean, God's not going to say, hey, Moses, stand back, boy, because I'm making for myself a crystal cathedral. A what? A crystal cathedral. What's a crystal? What's a crystal? Just stand. Get me some glass. What glass? God didn't do things. I mean, he things that they could recognize and understand. You follow me? Things that they could recognize. Yeah, I know what this is. I've seen this in Egypt before. This is where our God dwells. You look at ours and compare all the things that were inside it. Amazing. Events, obviously. Discipline, all these things that we know. How to procedural text. They told the priest how to build the tabernacle, didn't they? Here's all the instructions. This is what I want mine made out of. Well, we have how-to manuals. Amazing. Construction of the tabernacle. Construction of the ark. And then the last thing, well, there's, of course, processes you have to look at. Egyptian slavery and dominance. Look at ISIS. Slavery and dominance. Listen, it hasn't changed for thousands of years. Hasn't changed. That's one of the things that I'm sorry our president don't understand. This is embedded in their culture. It's the way it's always been. Slavery and dominance. What's the major rule in the Old Testament world? Might makes right, and possession is 9/10 of the law. It's the way it's always been. But might makes right. Listen, the Israelis, they're no angels. You understand that? If they got the stronger military weapons, guess what? Might makes right. I'm sorry, they do some hideous things to the Palestinians. You know that. They're not angels. They're not angels. And ISIS got the might, so what do? They come in. Taliban come in. Might makes right. Possession is 9/10 of the law. That's the way it's always been. Nothing new. Egyptians, of course, we look at Egypt, decreasing frontier, Canaanites, power, migration of Semites. We have that with Abraham coming down. Remember, they got so big, right? The Pharaoh said, what? We can't have this. Why? They're foreigners. Anchor babies? We have males being born. We can't have this. Kill them all. Amazing. What about the other side, Transjordan? Very interesting process, which we had time to look at, but we don't. Anyway, so that's where we'll be going this next couple weeks and bringing you up to speed on a lot of this information. And listen fast. As you know, Frank. Any questions, comments?
How did they come up with the Iron and Bronze Age? I'm sure there's other.
It's a loose cannon, But we do know bronze was used first. Iron doesn't come in to somewhere around. I mean, it was in fact on King Tut's. When King Tut, you know what was next to his heart when they unwrapped his mummy? Right next to his heart. What? It wasn't gold. You know what it was? A piece of steel. It had a piece of steel, right? That was the most precious object. A piece of steel next to it. So the development of culture. This is still debated today, but it's been set in stone for the past 100 years. Everybody still follows it. It needs revision, but no one wants to touch it. So, like our politicians, no one wants to touch. Oh, if you're not a politician, you can't rule the United States, huh?
I was wondering if it was, statue of Daniel.
No. Well, they had the materials back in those days to make those type. They had brass, they had bronze. Bronze has been around for a long time, and copper. So, yeah. All right. See y'all next week. You don't have to do that. I love this. This is fun.